The silence of the empty road outside the abandoned house grew louder in Aoife's ears. She tried to convince herself it was just the darkness playing tricks on her mind. But every rustle of leaves and faint whisper made her heart race. She looked at her boyfriend, Femi, who seemed unbothered, casually scrolling through his phone. "Are you sure this is safe?" she asked, her voice trembling. Femi laughed, brushing off her concerns. "It's fine, Aoife. People just like to spread scary stories about this place. Nothing bad will happen." But as they stood there waiting for their ride home, Aoife couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The shadows seemed to shift, and in the distance, she swore she saw a faint figure watching them. Hey viewers, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. You don't want to miss stories like this one, where real lessons come alive. Suddenly, Femi's phone buzzed with a message. The driver had canceled, leaving them stranded. "We'll just have to walk to the main road and find another ride," Femi said casually, stuffing his phone in his pocket. Aoife hesitated, glancing at the dark path ahead. "Can't we just stay here until morning?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No way," Femi replied firmly. "This place is too creepy. We'll be safer on the main road." Reluctantly, Aoife followed him, clutching his arm tightly as they began their trek. The faint figure she thought she'd seen earlier was now gone, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger with every step. The dirt road leading to the main road was darker than they expected. The dense trees on either side blocked out even the faintest moonlight. Aoife's grip on Femi's arm tightened as the silence around them was broken by the occasional rustle of leaves. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, stopping in her tracks. Femi shook his head and kept walking, but Aoife's fear grew. She couldn't help but glance back, her eyes scanning the path behind them. For a split second, she thought she saw a shadow dart between the trees. "Let's hurry," she urged, pulling Femi along faster. Just as they reached a clearing, a strange sound echoed through the forest. It was a low, guttural growl that sent chills down Aoife's spine. "What was that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Femi, who had been pretending to be calm, now looked genuinely worried. "I don't know," he admitted, glancing around nervously. Before they could decide what to do, the growling grew louder, and a pair of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. Aoife's breath caught in her throat as a large, shadowy creature stepped into the clearing. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, its body a mix of fur and scales, with claws that gleamed in the faint moonlight. Femi grabbed Aoife's hand, and they ran as fast as they could. The creature let out a deafening roar and charged after them. The sound of its heavy footsteps grew closer, and Aoife felt her heart pounding in her chest. "Keep running," Femi shouted, his voice filled with panic. They reached an old wooden bridge that looked like it could collapse at any moment. "We have to cross it," Femi said, but Aoife hesitated, glancing back at the creature. It was closing in fast, its glowing eyes locked on them. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed Femi's hand, and they both dashed onto the fragile bridge. The bridge creaked and groaned under their weight, and every step felt like it could be their last. Aoife didn't dare look down at the rushing river below. The creature stopped at the edge of the bridge, snarling angrily. It seemed hesitant to follow, as if it knew the bridge couldn't hold its weight. Just as they reached the other side, the bridge gave way with a loud crack. Aoife and Femi tumbled onto the ground, gasping for breath. They looked back to see the creature pacing along the edge of the broken bridge, its glowing eyes still fixed on them. Exhausted and shaken, Aoife and Femi made their way through the forest, hoping to find safety. The creature's growls faded into the distance, but the fear lingered. "What was that thing?" Aoife asked, her voice trembling. Femi shook his head, unable to answer. As they walked, they came across a small, abandoned hut. It looked old and worn, but it was their only option for shelter. "Let's rest here for a while," Femi suggested. Reluctantly, Aoife agreed, and they stepped inside. The air was damp and cold, and the faint smell of decay made her stomach turn. Inside the hut, they found an old lantern and some matches. Femi lit the lantern, and its warm glow provided a small sense of comfort. Aoife sat on the floor, wrapping her arms around herself. "I don't think we should have come to that party," she said, her voice filled with regret. Femi nodded silently, staring at the flickering light. "I should have listened to you," he admitted. "But we'll get through this. We just need to stay strong." Despite his words, Aoife could see the fear in his eyes. Deep down, she knew their ordeal was far from over. The faint light from the lantern flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the hut's wooden walls. Aoife couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't truly safe. The sounds of the night outside, the rustling of leaves, the distant calls of nocturnal animals, seemed unnaturally loud. Every noise made her heart race. "What if that thing finds us here?" she whispered. Femi tried to sound reassuring. "It can't cross the bridge, remember? It's probably gone back to wherever it came from." But deep down, even he wasn't sure. As they sat in uneasy silence, the lantern suddenly dimmed, and the room plunged into near darkness. Aoife gasped. "Why is it doing that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Femi inspected the lantern and found that the wick was burning out. "It's just the lantern," he said, but his voice lacked confidence. He fumbled through his pockets and found a lighter. "We'll keep this as a backup." Aoife nodded, though the dim light did little to calm her nerves. Suddenly, they heard a soft tapping sound at the window. Aoife froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Femi turned toward the window, his eyes wide with fear. The tapping grew louder and more deliberate, as if something, or someone, was trying to get in. Femi grabbed a broken piece of wood lying on the hut's floor and gestured for Aoife to stay back. Slowly, he approached the window. The tapping stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Femi peeked through the cracks in the wooden shutters, but the darkness outside revealed nothing. "There's no one there," he said, though his voice wavered. As he turned back to Aoife, a loud bang came from the door. Aoife screamed, backing into the corner of the hut. "It's here," she cried. Femi stood frozen, gripping the piece of wood tightly. The door rattled violently, as if something was trying to force it open. "Help me block the door," Femi shouted, snapping out of his fear. Aoife scrambled to her feet, and together, they pushed an old table against the door. The banging continued, growing louder and more aggressive. Aoife's heart raced as she realized the creature from earlier might have found them. Suddenly, the banging stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Aoife and Femi exchanged nervous glances, their breathing heavy. "Maybe it's gone," Femi whispered. But before they could relax, the roof above them creaked loudly, followed by the sound of something heavy crawling across it. The roof groaned under the weight of whatever was above them. Aoife clung to Femi, her eyes wide with terror. "What do we do?" she whispered. Femi looked around desperately for a way out. "We can't stay here," he said. "It'll get in eventually." They spotted a small back window that was just big enough to crawl through. "We'll go through there," Femi decided. He helped Aoife climb out first, and as she landed on the ground outside, she heard the roof crack. "Hurry," she urged, her voice shaking. Femi climbed out of the window just as the roof gave way, crashing into the hut. They didn't look back as they ran into the forest, their adrenaline pushing them forward. The dense trees provided some cover, but the darkness made it hard to see. Aoife tripped over a root, falling hard onto the ground. Femi helped her up, but before they could continue, a loud growl echoed through the forest. The glowing eyes of the creature appeared once again, this time closer than before. "It's following us," Aoife whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We have to keep moving." They stumbled upon a narrow path that seemed to lead uphill. "This way," Femi shouted, pulling Aoife along. The incline was steep, and their legs burned with each step, but they didn't stop. The growls grew fainter, and they hoped they were putting enough distance between themselves and the creature. At the top of the hill, they found an old shrine covered in vines and moss. It looked ancient, with carvings of symbols they didn't recognize. "What is this place?" Aoife asked, catching her breath. Femi didn't answer, but the strange energy of the shrine made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The shrine seemed abandoned, but its presence felt powerful. Aoife noticed a stone altar in the center, with a faint glow emanating from its surface. "Do you think this could help us?" she asked, pointing to the altar. Femi hesitated but nodded. "It's worth a try." As they approached the altar, the glow grew brighter. Aoife placed her hand on it, and a sudden warmth spread through her body. The carvings on the shrine lit up, and a deep, resonant voice echoed in the air. "You have awakened the ancient protector," the voice said. "But the danger is far from over." The voice startled both Aoife and Femi. They stepped back from the altar, their hearts pounding. Who's there?" Aoife asked, her voice trembling. The glowing carvings began to shift, forming symbols neither of them could understand. The voice spoke again, this time softer but still commanding. "The forest is not what it seems. You have awakened me, but you must prove your worth to survive." The ground beneath them trembled, and the shrine began to emit a pulsating light. Suddenly, a figure appeared, a tall, glowing being with features that seemed both human and divine. The glowing figure introduced itself as Aola, the ancient guardian of the forest. It had protected the land for centuries, but had been dormant until Aoife's touch awakened it. "Why are you running?" Aola asked, its voice echoing in the still night. "There's something chasing us," Femi blurted. "A creature. It's dangerous." Aola's glowing eyes narrowed. "You have crossed into sacred territory," it said. "The creature you speak of is a guardian of balance, but it has been corrupted." Aoife and Femi exchanged worried glances, realizing their actions might have caused this chaos. Aola explained that the corrupted creature was once a protector of the forest, but had been tainted by the greed and carelessness of humans. "The balance must be restored," Aola said. "But to do so, you must face your fears and take responsibility for your actions." "What do you mean?" Aoife asked nervously. Aola gestured toward the forest. "You must confront the creature and cleanse its spirit. Only then can you leave this place unharmed." Aoife's heart sank. She didn't feel brave enough to face the terrifying beast again, but Aola's words left no room for argument. Before they could protest, Aola extended its glowing hand, and a wave of energy enveloped them. They found themselves back at the edge of the forest, with the sounds of the creature's growls echoing nearby. "It's close," Femi whispered. Aoife clenched her fists, trying to summon courage. "We have to do this," she said, more to herself than to Femi. They followed the sounds, each step feeling heavier than the last. When they finally reached a clearing, the creature stood before them, its glowing eyes locked onto theirs. The creature let out a deafening roar, and Aoife and Femi froze in place. Its massive form seemed even more terrifying up close, with dark, matted fur and razor-sharp claws. "What do we do now?" Femi asked, his voice shaking. Aoife remembered Aola's words. They had to cleanse its spirit. Summoning all her courage, she stepped forward and said, "We're sorry for disturbing the forest. We didn't mean to cause harm." The creature hesitated, its growls softening slightly, as if it was listening. Aoife continued speaking, her voice steady despite her fear. "We didn't know the forest was sacred. Please, let us make things right." The creature's glowing eyes flickered, and it tilted its head, as if trying to understand. Femi joined in, saying, "We'll do whatever it takes to restore balance." The creature roared again, but this time, it didn't lunge at them. Instead, it lowered its head, revealing a deep scar across its chest. Aola's voice echoed in their minds. "The scar is the source of its corruption. You must heal it to set it free." Aoife and Femi exchanged nervous glances. How do we heal it? Aoife asked aloud, hoping Aola would answer. The glowing figure reappeared beside them, holding a small vial of shimmering liquid. This is the essence of the forest's purity, Aola said. Pour it over the scar. Femi took the vial with trembling hands. The creature growled softly, but it didn't move as he approached. Be careful, Aoife whispered. Femi nodded, his heart pounding as he uncorked the vial and poured the liquid over the scar. The moment the liquid touched the scar, the creature let out an ear-piercing roar. Its body convulsed, and the dark aura surrounding it began to dissipate. Aoife and Femi watched in awe as the creature's matted fur turned sleek, and its eyes lost their menacing glow. The creature collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily. Aola stepped forward and placed a glowing hand on its head. The corruption is gone, Aola said. You have restored balance to the forest. Aoife and Femi felt a wave of relief wash over them, but their journey was not yet over. The creature slowly rose to its feet, towering over Aoife and Femi. But now, its presence felt calm and protective rather than menacing. You have proven your courage and sincerity, Aola said. But your actions still carry consequences. The forest does not forget. What does that mean? Aoife asked, her voice trembling. Aola gestured to the glowing carvings on the nearby trees. You have disrupted the balance, and though you've begun to make amends, there is more to be done. The forest demands a guardian, and one of you must stay. The words hit Aoife and Femi like a thunderbolt. Stay? What do you mean? Femi asked. Aola explained. The guardian who fell to corruption left a void. The forest needs someone to protect its balance, someone pure of heart. Aoife stepped forward, her eyes filled with determination. If staying means the forest will be safe, I'll do it. Femi grabbed her hand, shaking his head. No, Aoife. This isn't your burden alone. Aola raised a glowing hand to quiet them. The choice is yours, but it must be made with a willing heart. They sat by the riverbank, grappling with the weight of the decision. I can't let you stay here, Aoife, Femi said. You have your family, your dreams. This isn't fair. Aoife looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. It's not about fairness, Femi. It's about doing what's right. The forest seemed to hold its breath as they talked, the only sound being the gentle flow of the river. We came here together, Femi finally said, his voice steady. We'll face this together. But deep down, they both knew the decision wasn't that simple. The night deepened, and Aola reappeared. Have you made your choice? It asked. Aoife took a deep breath and said, I'll stay. Femi opened his mouth to protest, but Aoife placed a hand on his shoulder. This is my decision, she said softly. Aola nodded solemnly. Very well, but before you stay, there is one final task. You must walk through the sacred grove and offer your pledge to the forest. The glowing figure turned and led the way, leaving Aoife and Femi to follow in silence. The sacred grove was unlike anything they had ever seen. The trees glowed faintly, their leaves shimmering like stars. Strange, beautiful creatures peeked out from the shadows, their eyes filled with curiosity. This is the heart of the forest, Aola said. It is where all life begins and ends. Aoife felt a deep connection to the place, as if it was calling to her. Aola handed her a small, glowing seed. Plant this in the grove and speak your truth. The forest will know your heart. Aoife knelt on the soft earth, her hands trembling as she prepared to fulfill the task. As Aoife planted the seed, she whispered her pledge. I promise to protect this forest and all its life. I will honor its balance and its beauty. The ground beneath her glowed, and the seed sprouted instantly, growing into a radiant tree. The tree's light enveloped Aoife, and she felt a warmth spreading through her body. Aola smiled, its glowing form flickering. The forest has accepted your pledge. You are now its guardian. Femi watched in awe, tears streaming down his face. He knew this moment marked the end of their journey together. Aoife turned to Femi, her her heart heavy but resolute. "You need to go back," she said. "Tell everyone what happened here. They need to understand the importance of this place." Femi nodded, though the thought of leaving her behind tore at him. "I'll never forget you," he said, his voice breaking. Aoife smiled, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "And I'll always be here, watching over you." Aola extended its hand to Femi. "Come, I will guide you out of the forest." Femi followed Aola through the forest, the glowing path illuminating their way. He couldn't shake the feeling of loss, but he also felt a deep sense of pride in Aoife's bravery. "Will I ever see her again?" he asked. Aola's voice was gentle. "Her spirit is now part of the forest. As long as you remember her, she will always be with you." The words offered some comfort, but Femi's heart still ached as they neared the edge of the forest. When Femi emerged from the forest, the first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon. He looked back one last time, hoping to catch a glimpse of Aoife. The forest seemed to shimmer in response, as if acknowledging his farewell. Femi returned to the village, carrying the weight of their story. He knew it was his responsibility to honor Aoife's sacrifice and to share the lessons they had learned. As he walked through the quiet streets, he vowed to keep her memory alive. When Femi reached the village, the elders were waiting, their faces filled with concern. "Where is Aoife?" one of them asked, her voice trembling. Femi took a deep breath and began to recount the events of the forest, describing Aola, the trials, and Aoife's ultimate decision to stay. The villagers listened in stunned silence, their expressions shifting from disbelief to awe. When Femi finished, an elder said, "Her bravery has saved us all. We must honor her sacrifice and protect the forest." The village, once indifferent to the sacred woods, now felt a deep respect for the place and its guardian. As days turned into weeks, Femi dedicated himself to spreading Aoife's story. He visited neighboring villages, sharing the lessons of balance and respect for nature. The forest, once feared and avoided, became a symbol of life and harmony. Meanwhile, Aoife adjusted to her new role as guardian. She found peace in the rhythms of the forest, her connection to its creatures and plants growing stronger each day. Though she missed her family and Femi, she felt a sense of purpose that filled her heart with pride. One day, as Femi sat by the edge of the forest, he thought he heard a familiar voice carried on the wind. "Femi," it whispered, soft and comforting. He stood up, scanning the trees, but saw no one. Yet he felt Aoife's presence, as though she was right beside him. The villagers noticed the change in Femi. Though he carried the weight of their shared journey, he also radiated a quiet strength. He had become a bridge between the human world and the forest, ensuring that both would thrive together. In the forest, Aoife discovered that her pledge had granted her unique abilities. She could communicate with the creatures and sense the forest's needs. One day, a wounded deer limped into the grove, its leg caught in a hunter's trap. Aoife knelt beside it, her touch soothing its pain. The forest seemed to respond to her compassion. The trees swayed gently, their leaves rustling like a song. Aoife realized that her bond with the forest wasn't just about protection. It was about nurturing life in all its forms. Back in the village, a drought threatened their crops. The elders gathered, worried about how they would survive. Femi spoke up. "The forest may help us. If we treat it with respect, it will provide what we need." Guided by Femi, the villagers approached the forest with offerings of thanks. To their amazement, a hidden spring emerged, its waters flowing into their fields. The villagers understood then that the forest wasn't just a place of danger. It was a source of life when treated with care. Femi often returned to the forest's edge, feeling a pull he couldn't explain. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he saw a glowing figure among the trees. It was Aola, its form shimmering in the fading light. "You miss her," Aola said, its voice gentle. Femi nodded. "Every day." Aola placed a glowing hand on his shoulder. Her spirit lives on in every leaf, every stream. She watches over you, Femi." The words filled Femi with a bittersweet comfort, reminding him that their connection would never fade. One day, Ife sensed an unfamiliar presence in the forest. A group of strangers had entered, carrying axes and ropes. They spoke of cutting down trees for profit, ignoring the forest's warnings. Ife knew she couldn't let them destroy her home. She appeared before them, her form glowing with the forest's power. "This is not yours to take," she said, her voice firm but calm. The strangers froze, their tools dropping to the ground. They fled, their greed replaced by fear and awe of the Guardian. News of the Guardian spread far and wide, reaching even distant villages. People came to the forest, not to harm it, but to marvel at its beauty and learn from its lessons. Femi became a guide, sharing Ife's story and teaching respect for nature. Though Ife couldn't leave the forest, she felt connected to the world beyond. Each visitor brought news of change, of people learning to live in harmony with the land. Ife's sacrifice had sparked a movement, one that bridged the gap between humans and nature. As the years passed, the forest flourished under Ife's care. New plants and animals appeared, their presence a testament to the balance she maintained. Ife herself had changed, her connection to the forest making her almost part of it. One day, as she walked through the sacred grove, she felt a warmth in her chest. The tree she had planted on her first day as guardian stood tall and strong, its branches reaching for the sky. It was a symbol of her journey, of the life she had chosen. The villagers held a festival every year to honor the forest and Ife's sacrifice. They called it the Guardian's Day. On this day, they gathered at the edge of the forest to sing, dance, and offer gifts of fruits and flowers. Femi always took part in the celebrations, telling Ife's story to the younger generation. He made sure they understood the importance of respecting the forest and living in harmony with nature. Though bittersweet, the day filled him with pride for what Ife had become. One night, Ife had a dream. She saw her parents standing by the river, their faces filled with love. "We are proud of you," her mother said, her voice as soft as the wind. When Ife woke, she found the river glowing faintly under the moonlight, as though it carried her parents' blessing. Ife realized that even though she couldn't return to the village, she could still feel the love of her family. It gave her strength to continue her role as the guardian, ensuring the forest remained safe and vibrant. Femi became a respected figure in the village. People sought his advice, not just about the forest, but about life. His wisdom, gained from his journey with Ife, inspired others to think beyond their immediate needs and care for the world around them. One day, a young boy approached Femi asking, "Will Ife ever come back?" Femi knelt to the boy's level and said, "Ife is always with us, in the rustling leaves, the flowing rivers, and the air we breathe. She's part of the forest now, and the forest is part of us." A severe storm hit the village, tearing roofs from houses and flooding the fields. The villagers turned to the forest, seeking its protection. Femi led them to a grove that remained untouched by the storm, its trees shielding them from the wind and rain. As they waited for the storm to pass, Femi whispered a prayer of thanks to Ife and the forest. The villagers, seeing the forest as a safe haven, promised to protect it, realizing its importance not just as a resource, but as a sanctuary. Over time, the forest's influence extended beyond the village. Travelers passing through marveled at its beauty and the stories of the guardian who protected it. Some even left offerings at the forest's edge, hoping for its blessing. Ife watched all of this with a quiet satisfaction. Though she missed her old life, she knew she was part of something much larger now. The forest had become a beacon of hope and renewal, and she was proud to play her part. One day, Femi found a small sapling growing at the forest's edge. Its leaves shimmered faintly, as though touched by magic. He realized it was a sign from Ife, a reminder of her presence and the bond they shared. Femi nurtured the sapling, ensuring it grew strong. It became a meeting place for the villagers, who gathered beneath its shade to share stories and celebrate their connection to the forest. The saplings symbolized their unity and respect for nature. As Aoife walked through the forest one evening, she felt a new energy in the air. The creatures of the forest seemed more vibrant, the plants more lush. Aola appeared beside her, its form glowing softly. "You have done well, Aoife," it said. Aoife smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "It's not just me," she replied. "The villagers have changed too. They see the forest as a partner, not a tool." Aola nodded, its glow brightening. "That is the greatest gift you could give." Years later, Femi sat by the river, now an elder himself. He often came here to reflect on his journey with Aoife. Though much had changed, the forest remained the same, vibrant, alive, and full of mystery. As he looked at the water, he thought he saw Aoife's reflection smiling back at him. He chuckled softly, knowing it was the forest's way of reminding him that she was still there, watching over them all. And as long as the forest stood, her spirit would never fade.